Hey folks, here at OSandVTXReviews.com. You're watching our video review of the Toshiba Satellite L455D series laptop. This product has a AMD Sempron 2.1 GHz dual-core chipset, which I think is about comparable to Intel, perhaps Intel Pentium, or perhaps an Intel Core i3 chipset in terms of performance. So it's not terribly great, but it's also decent for most practical usages like browsing the web, viewing applications. Some basic games here and there will run just fine. The model that we have here has a 15.6-inch display, 4 GB of RAM, and a 600 GB hard drive installed. The device runs on Microsoft Windows 7 Home Premium as the operating system, and it has a multi-touch trackpad, which you can see in a moment, and it has a few applications pre-included, but not too much. It's a pretty clean install, which we do like, and essentially that's it as far as specs are considered. Again, at 15.6 inches, it's a pretty standard laptop in terms of the size. It's pretty easy to carry around with you. One thing I will say, though, is that this particular laptop is quite thick. So even though it's made out of plastic and not too heavy, it has a huge portfolio just because it has this thick design on the sides. Again, I guess that Toshiba wasn't really aiming for a super thin model here because it is very cost-friendly, retailing it only around $400. But again, if you are looking for something like an ultra-portable, you should probably look elsewhere because of the larger size here. Otherwise, you have a few LED indicators on the bottom here. You also have access to a few interesting ports located right on the bottom, which is something that we don't usually find. And those correspond to a SD card reader on the unit. You also have access to two ports here corresponding to 3.5mm headphone jack, a microphone out port, and also an interesting scroll wheel for adjusting the volume of the product. So it's kind of interesting they have a external monitor, external function just for that. It's not something we have really seen before, but it's a nice feature to have nevertheless. The left-hand side of the unit has access to the VGA out port, the Ethernet port, and one USB 2.0 port, whereas the right-hand side of the unit has access to two more USB 2.0 ports and a fully functional rewritable DVD/CD drive for you to play back DVDs and install your own software. There's also the standard Toshiba battery charger on the side and a lock, and essentially that is it. Taking a look at the design of the product, it's nothing too special. It has a metallic silver finish without too much of a design in terms of the actual plastic materials used, but it has a nice sense of durability involved, so it doesn't feel too cheap either, which is definitely nice, and feels pretty quality made, to be honest. Something that I do like about this laptop, opposed to other kind of Windows 7 machines out there, is the fact that it has a very good hinge. When opening up this thing, you will notice how it has this hinge, which is opening up on the top here. It has a one-piece hinge all the way running from the top to the right, instead of having a split hinge, one at the side and one on the side. This makes this product be extremely durable, at least in my opinion, so you can see how the hinge is something that evokes a lot of confidence, especially if you're using it. It also allows for the display to be rotated a lot further than on a traditional laptop, perhaps produced by HP or Gateway. So it has a really good hinge mechanism, so it has a great durability and quality to it if you plan on opening and shutting your laptop a lot through day-to-day usage. Otherwise, a downside to this laptop is it doesn't have a built-in webcam, so if you want something that has, again, video chatting capabilities, you have to plug in your own pair of your own camera onto this unit just to have that feature. But the screen itself is pretty good in terms of viewing angles. It's very, very bright, and it's even viewable under direct sunlight, which is something that we really like about this laptop. Otherwise, on the bottom here, you have access to two dual speakers, and they provide pretty adequate sound for playing back YouTube videos, basic sound files and MP3 files, and playing back videos and videos. And there's also a power on and off switch on the side here. The keyboard itself is pretty traditional. It's layered inwards, which I'm not a huge fan of because I feel like Toshiba could have done a better job by providing and using better space management and using up the entire size of the laptop, but it's a little bit smaller, but the keys are still pretty tactile, responsive, and easy to press, so I could get pretty high speed and also accuracy when typing on this thing if I was writing reviews and writing essays, which is something that I do like. The trackpad itself is not too large, but also not too small. It's on the moderate side, about 3.2 inches diagonally, so it's a fair amount for multitasking and also using it on a day-to-day basis. It's a glossy trackpad, which is pretty sensitive and easy to use, but you can see how the paint kind of rubs off on the center prematurely, which is not that great, but it still feels like the same material all the way through, even though the paint is gone, which is kind of interesting. The bottom here features that traditional Toshiba-inspired clicker pattern, which is interesting because I'm not a huge fan of, but it's also pretty large and tactile. They correspond to the left and right clicker keys, but they're rounded off, and so if you press on them, they're tactile, but at the same time, they're weaker on the sides rather than kind of consistent throughout. So if you press on the center, it feels really good, but if you press on the sides, it feels a little bit wobbly. But it's really large, so it's pretty easy to press, and I think it's better than a one-piece clicker by HP or something of that caliber. Taking a look at how the device performs, again, it's a pretty adequate performance. I will say that one area where the Sempron processor kind of lags behind an Intel counterpart is playing back some YouTube videos, because streaming videos are kind of a hit and miss with this processor. I will say that whereas even lower-end processors by Intel, such as the Intel Celeron, does a good job of playing back streaming videos on YouTube, this one kind of stutters and is a little bit more difficult for the processor to keep up, which is a little bit disappointing. But other streaming video services, like on Hulu, will also work very well. So it's something that's a hit and miss, which I'm not sure of. However, the web browsing experience overall is very speedy. The Wi-Fi card enabled here is pretty strong, and you can see how the processor and everything handles the pages pretty well and loads up pages that are complex fairly quickly, and multitasking can still be done fairly adequately as well. And the same can be said about GPU and game performance. But again, you can see how Flash ads are loading and pretty smooth, but if we play back, it's just mainly, I think, HD videos, so do stutter a little bit at first, and then it gets better as you start using it more and more. So if we search up OS reviews, again, you can see that it loads pretty fast. But if we wanted to play our channel trailer, for instance, it works pretty well, but on a larger screen, it stutters a little bit more at first, but it gets smoother. You can see a little bit of dropped frame rates here and there, but it gets smoother as you start playing it more and more. So it's not that bad, but not as good as some competitors. And it's more notable and prominent if you play back longer videos than just 1 minute. So if you want to play back an hour-long video, it's a little bit more apparent on YouTube. Still, it's a pretty good web browsing experience. Nothing really to write home about, but nothing too bad. So if you want to search up New York Times, for instance, reading up articles is a breeze, and it handles complex pages with Flash elements quite nicely. Personally, I'm a pretty big fan of Windows 7 Home Premium. I think that Windows 7 in general is very good and very easy to use. It looks modern enough, but at the same time, it's very simplistic and easy to understand. And as long as you don't have a touchscreen laptop, which obviously this one isn't, I think that Windows 7 has the upper hand compared to Windows 8. But as you can see, everything loads very quickly, loads fast, and works as advertised. Otherwise, again, not too many other programs pre-installed by Toshiba, not any bloatware on here, which is really, really nice. But again, you have some basic games, getting started with Windows Media Players, some basic DVD makers, basic Google Chrome games are also installed on here, XPS Viewer. Adobe Reader is pre-installed, which is kind of nice, so you can read back PDF files quite easily, and download files as well, but overall, pretty good performance. As far as battery life is considered, the device runs not as good as Windows 8 because it's not as optimized, and in our test it ran about 2 to 3 hours before we had to recharge it, which is okay for a Windows 7 product, but on the shorter side of the spectrum by today's modern standards. And as far as heating is considered, the product is pretty cool, and the fans didn't really click in unless we did a lot of multitasking. And by a lot, I mean opening up 5 or 6 different web pages at the same time, reading a book or something like that. But if you do things pretty simply by watching only one YouTube video, or browse the web with only one page open, the product is pretty speedy, it's pretty quiet, and it's one of the better kind of performance in terms of single page reading for the web browsing that we've tested in our past, which is definitely good. Overall, the product itself, again, performs pretty admirably. If you are looking for a Windows 7 machine that does the job well, but it won't break the bank, if you're looking for something that's really quality constructed with a pretty good keyboard, pretty good speakers, a very good hinge, that's something that's going to last you a long time, you don't really care about the fact that it's a little bit thicker than your traditional laptop, you don't really care that you have to have Windows 8 or the newest operating system, I think that this laptop will more than do the trick or do the job. So overall, very solid piece of kit by Toshiba, and we definitely think that we would recommend this laptop for consumers out there looking for a basic machine to use on a day-to-day basis. Thanks for watching this video review here at OS and VTXreviews.com. This is the Toshiba Satellite L455D series laptop computer with 4 GB of RAM, 600 GB of hard drive storage, and a AMD Sempron 2.1 GHz dual-core chipset.